Okay, hello everybody. Uh, Thank you to the organizers for this nice meeting and for inviting me. My name is Daniel McNally. I'm an editor at Nature Materials. So here's a little about me. I've been with Nature Materials in New York for around 5 years. Before that, I was like you. I was doing research. I was a postdoc in Paul Scherrer Institute, and before that, a PhD student at Stony Brook University. And during that time doing research, I studied, magnetism and superconductivity, and the topics that I cover at Nature and Materials are spintronics and magnetism, topological materials, superconductivity, sort of quantum materials generally. So I start out with the question for the audience. How many papers do you think are published in material science every year? Of course, any 50,000? Okay, yeah, it's good. It's quite hard to define material science as a broad interdisciplinary, so I just say on the order of 10 to the power, hundreds of thousands. So Xiaodong was pretty good, I guess. And then the next question is, how many papers do researchers read? Only Nature Materials? Okay, well, if you only read Nature Materials, you read maybe 180, so 250. That's a good choice. So then the point is, we have all these manuscripts, you can't read all of them, right? So that's why we have these sort of more selective journals, to help people to know what to read. Nature itself, Nature was founded 150 years ago, and their mission statement was to, provide a forum or like an outlet for research to be published, to make it accessible to a more general audience, whether of scientists themselves or also the general public, perhaps who are interested. And, those missions remain the same today, more or less, I think. Nature Materials was launched in 2002, so around 20 years ago. And that was, to provide an outlet for the growing field of material science. And it has a very broad scope covering physics, chemistry, biology, medicine. And it's a high impact journal with, competitive metrics and good decision times. We cover a very broad scope, but I provide a list of topics, and the list changes over time. For example, topological materials wasn't a thing when Nature Materials was launched, right? Now we cover those topics. So the team is composed of these 8 people, and all the decisions made at Nature Materials are made by this team of 8 people. There's no external editorial boards. So the chief editor is this guy up the top, Vincent Dussacht, and he's been there the whole time. He launched the journal in 2002, and he's still, there. And you see, we have 2 people covering condensed matter physics. So, it's a big field. So you need 2 of the 8 people just to cover that. And we cover biomaterials, soft matter, structural materials, chemistry, batteries, catalysts. As I say, there's no limit to the scope, really. We're editorially independent, so no external editorial board. All the decisions are made in-house by that team of 8 editors. We're highly selective with an acceptance rate below 5%. And there's a whole host of other research journals that I show here. And, it's the author choice. Where do they want to submit their work? Obviously, I'll tell you to submit your best work to Nature Materials. And I'm sure you do already. So, but you know, you're Nature Physics 2005, and a relevant journal for this audience, and nanotechnology and the electronics in 2018. And in 2024, there is going to be a new journal, Nature Chemical Engineering. So these journals actually are now, they have an open access option. You don't have to publish open access, but if you want to, you can pay and you can publish open access. There's a whole host of other open access journals within the Springer Nature company that are, you know, you're probably familiar with Nature Communications. And then there's these communications journals that are all selective journals with editorial boards, and Scientific Reports is a mega journal that, you know, peer reviews its content, but it doesn't have to have a particular impact associated with it. So we divide our content that we publish into front half and back half. The front half is, you know, usually not original research. So it's reviews or perspectives and news and views. And the editorials are why it matters pieces. I'll provide some examples. For instance, this is a manuscript we published. This is original research, and I found this, you know, quite, it was a difficult paper, I thought, right then, spin domain formation of polycrystalline halides. So I asked an expert in the field to write a news and views on this paper as part of our front half content. We publish editorials each month written by the editors, typically. So a recent editorial, I show an example here, is that scientific papers are becoming less disruptive, you know, somehow less impactful per each paper, because I guess there's a lot more manuscripts. We have focus issues from time to time. So it was the 20th anniversary of Nature Materials in 2022. So each of the editors asked, you know, a leader in the field who'd kind of been around for those 20 years to write on a particular topic. So I asked Professor Takora to write something, and he wrote Quantum Materials at the Crossroads of Strong Correlation and Topology, a title very similar to the title of this conference, I feel like, but it doesn't have flat bands in it. But and this, you know, it's a nice place to go. The 20th anniversary, if you want to read about, you know, structural materials or silicon photonics or batteries. They're only short 1,000-word pieces. So that was the front half content. The back half content is the primary research articles, which really forms the core of the journal. And we also have matters arising pieces where if you want to comment on a particular paper, and we encourage authors, if their manuscripts are accepted, to submit cover art. So now the editorial process, I will discuss a little bit, this black box. And I guess the first part is when you, the researcher, start to write your paper, and you have to think about, you know, what you have done. And there's some helpful guidelines, I think, that I took from someone else. So have a clear message that you want to communicate. You know, what is the main advance? What do we learn that is new, and why is it important? And that not everyone will understand the details. I won't understand the details, but they'll understand the main message that you're trying to get across. And, you know, you don't need to hype the results. And at the same time, you know, you don't need to worry too much if you think you're not so strong at writing. We won't decline a paper, you know, purely based on poor language. But having good language, then I think, is an advantage too, right? At the same time. So it's when you go to submit, you can upload a cover letter to go with the manuscript. And you can think of your cover letter as an opportunity to have a coffee with the editor and really tell them, what advance you have made and why you think it's interesting, why other people should think it's interesting, and what are the implications. Will it stimulate further work in the field? And you can suggest people to peer review the work, and we will sometimes take up, choose one of those people. But of course, it won't be someone who you collaborate with. And you can also exclude people from peer reviewing the manuscript, and we generally won't ever ask them, unless it's a whole institution or entire fields. It's okay to put preprints on the archive, and you can post the initial version, but then we ask that you don't publish revised versions until an embargo is lifted 6 months after your paper appears in the journal. It's okay to present your work at conferences, and you should present your work at conferences because it'll make it better with the feedback you receive. But peer-reviewed publications and conference proceedings or journals preclude publication in Nature materials. So the life of a manuscript after submission is more laughs. You got the most laughs in this talk, at least so far. So the editorial process, we get 3,000 plus papers per year, probably more than 3,000 here. And these are divided between the 8 editors on the team. There can be some overlap in the fields you cover, but at the same time, it's usually pretty clear who will handle the paper, but we can discuss it amongst ourselves. And we do try to get an initial decision back in a week or so. So what we are looking for, we have like an editorial bar, that can move around a bit. A remarkable degree of advance, fundamental or methodological or conceptual or practical, with whole story and the broad implications, and it should be of interest, to people in the field, right? At least. So if we do decide that we want to seek external, advice from peer reviewers, we look at what you have done, what kind of experiments you have done, what kind of systems are you working on, and we try to enlist people from that community who are working with those tools or on those materials. And that's typically, we need 2 to 4 people to look at the paper. We try to constantly renew our pool of people who are going to peer review. And we ask for, their decision within a few weeks, right, from when they accept. And I'm going to provide some example. Here's another editorial that Nature Materials had 2 months ago in praise of peer review, some sort of self-praise. But one interesting thing was that peer review, as we all know it now, has really only been done this way for 50 years, right? And it seems very ingrained into the society now. Another thing about renewing the pool of people who peer review so that it doesn't become a club, right? This was a Nature Physics figure that they made for an editorial on their 10-year anniversary, so a few years ago. On the vertical axis, you have the number of people who have peer reviewed, and then on the horizontal axis, the number of manuscripts they have peer reviewed. So there's very few people who have peer reviewed over 10 manuscripts for Nature Physics after 10 years that it had been around, right? So that's a nice thing. And maybe watching your talks today, I'm going to ask one of you to peer review who hasn't peer reviewed for Nature Materials before. So then if, after we receive the peer review reports, we decide whether to decline publication at that stage or to say, if you can address all these comments, we'd be happy to look at a revised version. There's no time limit on how long it takes you to come back, but there shouldn't be a manuscript published in the meantime that is taking away from your main claims, right? Done very similar work, let's say. And when you send back your point-by-point response to the peer reviewers, we will look over it. We'll decide whether to send it back for peer review or not. We do like to send it back, to get another round, at least 2 rounds of feedback. And if your paper is accepted, it goes through thorough copy editing, art editing. We might do a news and views on articles that are particularly well received, or in some cases, if we think it would help people to understand them better. So before you submit to us, you should think where you should try to find out where you believe, well, through talking to your peers and presenting the work at conferences, I guess you receive feedback on the interest there is in the work from your community. And from that feedback, you could choose what journal of what impact that you want to submit your work to. And that's what you call self-censorship. And it's good to prepare your paper the first time and to comply with all the guidelines and whatnot. But as I say, we won't decline your paper just based on poor language. So if we do decline your manuscript, we will typically suggest that another journal within the Springer Nature portfolio of journals that you could submit your work to. We can also sometimes consult with our editorial peers at the other journals before or after peer review. This is particularly helpful, I think, after peer review, if there's not many technical concerns, but they just don't think your work is impactful enough for Nature Materials. You can just click the button and get published there instead. You can appeal to Nature Materials after any decision. And the appeals will take a longer time than a week. It could take anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to get back to you. And you can appeal. People often appeal to Nature Materials post-review. It's quite rare if I decline a paper that they don't appeal. But so anyway, I won't say much more. How not to appeal is and reporting requirements. Some editors in various fields like solar cells say, you need to have a checklist before you submit your work to Nature Materials to show reproducibility, and reproducibility is an issue in, I think, this field too a bit, but we don't have any reporting requirements for this field at the moment, and I don't really know what they would be if you did, but might be a good idea. So you can also share Nature Materials. We're under a paywall at the moment, so if you're in the university, you can read Nature Materials. But if you have a interested party who doesn't have access to Nature Materials, who can share a link to any article on Nature Materials, you just scroll down, you generate a link, and you share it. Very simple. The current model for peer review that probably most of you are familiar with is single blind, where you don't know who's peer reviewing your manuscript, but they know who you are. We also have the option of double blind peer review. So they don't know who you are and you don't know who they are. So you shouldn't post a preprint on the archive, for example. And this is surprisingly unpopular. Very few people choose this. Right? Maybe 2% choose it, I would say. Very unpopular. Transparent peer review is at some of our journals. It's not in Nature Materials, but there you can read the reviewer's comments on the paper, I think, if the reviewer agreed to release their comments. So we try out these different models to see, if the community is interested in them or not. Everyone here peer reviews papers, and it's important to take the time to read the paper, identify the main claims, and to bring up all your points in the first round. And, then you bring up your technical concerns and you say, if all these technical concerns are met, I do think this paper is important enough. Or even if all these technical concerns are met, I still don't think it's impactful enough for Nature Materials. Here's the instructions that we provide to peer reviewers if they accept the Nature Materials. If they accept 2 peer review and Nature Materials work. And I think that's really all I have to say. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
That means expert level, we learn all the techniques, but then of course there's not the person of you. So for instance, I didn't have for you that paper no point penalty or do that paper. Well, for some reason, in the model, and then the people put something like that, and then after 2 years, got breaking or exploding of the citation. So your fault.
Yeah, that's happened to me where I've declined papers without peer review. And then I've seen them published in other, actually very impactful journals, and they've been, somehow groundbreaking, But you learn from your mistakes, right? I guess like anything. No, we don't have any AI thing helping us. No, but I mean, maybe. AI could be applied to this problem somehow, I think, right? But they don't have anything for it now. I mean, one thing for AI is, well, finding people to peer review papers, right? A nice thing in Nature Materials is you have the time to pick who you're going to peer review the paper, right? You sort of know the field, etc. But for a lot of journals, they don't have editors to do that really. So maybe AI will come into play there. And yeah, the training at the beginning, of course, you're experienced on the topics, and yet the first few months or 6 months, let's say, to a year or more that you're an editor, with a research journal, before you make the decision, you circulate comments to a senior editor and they provide feedback. And yeah, it can be hard at the start, but you get, it's like riding a bicycle, I think, after a while.
Yeah, so I'm a postdoc. At this point, I've published 5 papers, and in that process, I've had more than 5 reviewers write a very short line that just says, "This paper isn't interesting enough to publish it." And I'm just curious, what do you?
So that wouldn't be enough for Nature Materials. Somebody gives me that review report. I mean, I'm never asking them to peer review again, and I'm not really considering it in my decision, right? I'd have to enlist another person, right? So, okay, I thought there was a second part, maybe. Yeah. Right now, I don't think in Nature Materials we don't offer the option. We offer the option for the peer reviewer to identify themselves. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I think, people have varying opinions. But it can be good to offer the option, perhaps. So maybe the research journal should offer the option that you can publish the reviewer comments. I think they've started it, yes. At the research journal, I don't think Nature Materials, I'm pretty sure Nature Materials doesn't do it. Yeah, the research journals don't do it. So, and I'm not sure what the numbers are on the uptake for Nature, so how many are for Nature Communications, how many people, or they force them to publish. You see, I don't really like that because I see a lot of people saying to me as well, some people say, oh, it's great to have transparent peer review. Other people say they don't like it and they won't peer review if they. Yeah, but I don't think people, some people don't like that. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind the option to offer that you can publish your comments if you want. And that you can release your name if you want. That's just that. The option. Yeah. Yes. 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 So we have a special issue coming up in January, maybe, on reproducibility in material science. So that will be with something like with this topic that you mentioned.
Very quick question. So what's the feeling you guys like educate had for a particular subject or topic? So what's the get on topic, or how you guys think about either need to talk to the authors actually or come to the conference?
I guess it is going, a lot of it is going to conferences, and yeah, because I find it very boring to stay at your desk or stay at home. So you see what people are interested in, but also the editorial bar can be different for different topics. You know, if it's a topic I don't publish all that much, it's an old topic or something, and I'm like, I give it a try, you know, you can set the bar a little lower, you know, for different topics. You know, what is hot? I mean, clearly this fractional quantum anomalous Hall effect is pretty hot, right? So they'll have to send us some high quality papers on that topic. But yeah, we don't say we have to publish on a particular thing, you know. You have a lot of freedom as the individual editor too. But yeah.
Watch out the tops.
There should be some element of my character in the things we publish, I guess, to some degree. But it's mostly the researchers themselves, right? I'm just a gatekeeper or conduit, I guess. Thank you.